Hi everyone, and welcome to AsiaLink Business's webinar, E-commerce Opportunities in Asia. I would now like to hand over to Lee Howard, CEO of AsiaLink Business.
Well, thank you and welcome everyone to today's event, where we're going to take some time speaking with our panel of experts on e-commerce regarding opportunities in our region. My name's Lee Howard. I'm the CEO of AsiaLink Business, Australia's National Centre for Asia Capability, and it's our pleasure to bring you this event today. So before we begin today's proceedings, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm coming to you from today. I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and we extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be attending the online event today. A few housekeeping matters. This webinar will be recorded and will also be made available after today's session. If you do have any questions for the panelists, please use the Q&A function within Zoom, and we'll endeavour to answer as many questions as possible towards the end of the discussion. Today, we're joined by speakers who operate in China and Southeast Asia's e-commerce ecosystems, and they'll be sharing their key insights and tips to navigating the region for success. To get us underway, I would like to introduce one of our partners for the event to open the webinar with his welcome remarks before we move to our panel discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, Sachvinder Singh is a director at Handshakes Technology who represents Scout Asia across the Asia Pacific region. I had the pleasure of first meeting Sach in Malaysia. It was pre-pandemic, so it's been quite a few years. And Sach has a wealth of commercial experience across the digital sector, and we look forward to his welcome remarks to get us started. Sach, thank you and welcome.
Thanks, Lee. And I would like to say it's a pleasure to collaborate with AsiaLink Business for this webinar. It's been a fantastic opportunity. Just a quick introduction again. I'm Sach. I'm the director of Handshakes Technology, which is a data tech company headquartered in Singapore with regional presence across Asia Pacific, including Australia, where I'm currently based. Just a bit of background again. Lee has been one of the reasons we decided to expand our business to Australia way back in 2018, where he was extremely persuasive and helped us understand there's a significant demand of data and technology such as ours in Australia. So thanks, Lee, for that. Together with our investors, Nikkei and Financial Times, we have jointly developed Scout Asia, which is a corporate news monitoring platform powered by machine learning technology, which assists our clients with identifying potential clients, customers, investments, due diligence, running due diligence, and understanding market trends, which brings me to the trends that we have observed in the digital spaces of late, right? Now, one would be cybercrime, right? Where we understand it could cost 12 trillion to the global economy annually by 2030. We have gone from protecting citizens' data. It's not only ethical responsibility, but also a legal one. This year, especially, we have seen how significant this is with some high-profile data hacks, including Optus, and most recent one being Malaysia with AirAsia. The second one I would say, it's automation, digital transformation, which is synonymous with improving organizations' capabilities, efficiencies, security, customer service, and more. But one group of people we see being brought into the equation is employees. Simply put, digital employee experience refers to the employees' digital experience in their work environment. It's the technologies they have access to. It's how IT enables them to communicate in new ways. It's work processes that are enhanced by digital solutions and everything in between. I remember seeing a 2020 digital employee experience survey conducted by IT consultancies, Step 2, where it says that 40 to 42% employees consider digital employee experience to be either extremely important or very important. And the growth of digital interactions in workspace has come about in big part because of rising importance of data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. And the third trend, finally, would be the rise of e-commerce, which brings us nicely to the experts we have in our panel today, which I myself am very keen to understand more about the trends and opportunities within this space. With this, I will hand it over to you, Lee, and thank you again so much for this opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from the experts.
That's great. Thanks, Ash, for your insights. I'd now like to introduce our stellar lineup of panelists for today's session. And I can tell you that they are dialing in from all across the region. We have 4 panelists today: Pier Smulders, General Manager, Australia and New Zealand for the Alibaba Group; Carolyn Heath, Chief Customer Officer, Anagenics; Azam Kassim, Founder and Director, Hub Shifa Australia; and Hans-Peter Ressel, who likes to be called HP, Founder and CEO, Momentum Commerce. So welcome to all of our panelists. I'd like to start with an opening question for each of you, and perhaps to bring us up to speed on the trends that you're seeing, particularly now that we're moving out of the restriction phases in many parts of the world in relation to COVID-19. Could I get each of you to introduce yourself, the work that you do, and perhaps, as I say, touch on the latest trends you're observing in the market? Pierre, can we start with you?
Thanks, Lee. Hopefully this is all clear and you can hear me and see me. I am also in the region that we're talking about at the moment. I have started my whole area. I'm calling in from Phuket in Thailand. Great, thank you all of you for joining us today. So my role as GM for the Alibaba Group in Australia and New Zealand is probably threefold. The first is to support Australia and New Zealand brands to go to reach Chinese consumers and increasingly Southeast Asian consumers. The second is we have a big global presence with our Alibaba.com B2B marketplace. And the third, we have a big cloud business. So in the digital space, with providing cloud solutions to companies, not just who want to go to China, but also we provide other solutions that are suitable for these companies. We have the 3rd largest cloud business in the world, which is something maybe not many people know about. But in terms of today, I think the most relevant is probably talking about e-commerce. I'm not going to focus too much on what we're doing in Southeast Asia, which is a very fast-growing part of our business through Lazada, because I know Southeast Asia is very well covered today. So I'll focus mostly on China, which is probably where we're most well known for. Alibaba Group has around $1 trillion of goods and services sold on its marketplaces in China each year, of a total of about 1.3 trillion, which is 300 billion outside of China. So that's roughly the size of Australia's GDP. We continue to see growth. So even though you might hear that China is going through a challenging phase, as the world is, we continue to see growth. And I think more importantly, for Australian New Zealand brands, there is such a huge market when you think about the 1 trillion that just the Alibaba Group sells through its digital marketplaces, online and offline in China, that there is so much opportunity, even in a slower growing market, for Australian New Zealand brands to find success. And we keep seeing that. Just some data released yesterday by the Chinese statisticians. Online physical goods grew by 6.4% year on year, which is pretty impressive considering the year that China's been through. And within that, online groceries, again, it's probably not surprising, went up by 19%. Sorry, I don't know how I get rid of this. Went up by 19. And now online contributes around 27% of total consumer goods sales in China, which is very, very significant. So I think we keep seeing a very strong market. The shift to digital is continuing, and China continues, I think, to lead probably globally in terms of the share of digital sales that are online. So Alibaba, it's not really, us. We've really rode that wave of the Chinese consumer moving to online, and also the Chinese consumers moving into the middle class.
Excellent. Thanks, Pierre. Carolyn, over to you.
Thank you. So a little bit about Anagenics. Anagenics is an international beauty, health and wellness company. I'd say we're quite small. We're ASX listed. It's quite small, but big ambitions. And we largely play in 3 markets: Australia, where we distribute premium skincare brands and products through premium retail outlets like spas and salons. And then we also have a hair loss shampoo tonic technology that was actually discovered in Japan, and we distribute that in Australia, China, and in the US market. So the brand, obviously, that I'm focusing on for the purposes of this webinar is Evolus, because that's the brand that we've taken into the Chinese market. And so hair loss is a big market. I mean, we talk about why would we go into China? 1.4 billion people is the main reason why we entered that market. And I think Pier had a point there that, you know, you only really need a slither of that market, and you could be doing better than what you're doing in your local Australian market. So for us, China, given there was a huge opportunity with hair loss as an issue, stress-induced hair loss, COVID, 24 to 25% of people that will have COVID will go through hair loss. So it's an opportunity for us. However, on the other hand, China is a heavily regulated market. And so what makes it quite different to any other market that we go into is that we can't even buy the search terms of hair growth or hair loss. So it's a difficult market to operate in. But I think, you know, there's always opportunities and there's always ways around it, and we've managed to do that. In terms of the trends that we're seeing, what's really interesting now with China is that they've done a 180-degree shift in their approach to COVID. So rather than going into testing and lockdown, and, you know, if you test positive, you then need to go into a facility, they've now opened up the market. And so what we're seeing is two types of consumers. One who is over being locked up and buying online, that actually wants to go out into the market and experience life and get out there, and they're probably going to start to get COVID and spread it around. And then the other group are those that are really scared and nervous about leaving and are worried and terrified about COVID, and they're focusing their money on health, wellness, and medicinal products that are going to make them feel better. And sometimes there's not a lot of rhyme and reason to it. Nevertheless, it's an odd market for us. We've been, you know, just talking to our trade partner in China literally just before this call, and we think the next 6 months going to be quite bumpy. But we really feel that there's a huge opportunity for China once it gets through this little blip of opening up with COVID. And I think there's always going to be opportunities to play. So, I mean, I think anyone that has a product that tackles immunity, health and wellness may soon find that there might be an opportunity to enter in this difficult period. And if you don't, then I still think there is an opportunity to get ready for what will be, you know, the growth period of China once they get through this little kind of COVID blip, let's call it that.
Excellent. Thanks, Carolyn. Azam, welcome to you. You're coming to us from Malaysia today. Tell us a little bit about the work you're doing.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks for having me on. As Lee mentioned, my name is Azam Kassim. I'm the founder of Shifa. We're based in Melbourne, Australia, and we've been around since about 2010. And our business is focused around the black seed or the Nigella seed. And the business was, you know, registered in 2010, but we had to go through the process of getting approvals through the TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Administration. And we primarily deal in the manufacturing and distribution of a whole range of products that revolves around the black seed. We also have, you know, we also work with Manuka honey, and then we have a combination of products with the black seed and honey. And the main objective of Shifa was, you know, bringing to life black seed. A little bit of history about the black seed. It's been around for a few thousand years, very well known in lots of parts of Asia and the Middle East as well, but not so much in Australia. So we had to firstly go through the process of educating consumers on the existence of the product and ingredient, and then the benefits of the product. So black seed itself is quite well known for its immune benefits. And a whole range of antifungal and antibacterial benefits. So we did things a little bit differently. We're working with a whole range of science organizations. We've got clinical trials at the moment. We've just completed a large project with CSIRO, or CSIRO, which is Australia's national science agency, on extraction methods and also a clinical trial on blood sugar modulation. So there's one ingredient or one compound in the black seed, which is only unique to black seed, called TQ, or thymoquinone, which is the scientific term. and that's known to essentially have something extremely unique to boost the immune system. So initially we had the challenge of educating consumers, and then after a while, our products now available right across Australia in health food stores and pharmacies, and also we export across to a whole range of markets around the world and lots of parts of Asia as well. Indonesia is a market that we got into back in 2017, and we had some initial challenges, which I'll go through a little later. And COVID's been honestly a bit of an interesting time, not only for Australia, but I think for everyone here and all the businesses. And in our space, I feel that it actually brought additional opportunity. So a lot of people that weren't aware of products started doing a lot more research and natural health supplements and how it could benefit them. And then this actually brought upon an opportunity for us to essentially, take our business to the next level. And also, this also brought opportunities for a lot of other companies to, if they were not visible online due to COVID, this actually forced them to, have their own website. Thankfully, we were quite prepared, so that actually, didn't get us in any trouble, and we managed to scrape through unscathed. But and there was a lot of other ways that COVID affected many companies, and having different facilities like live chat, 24/7 live chat, improving your social media, and keeping in touch with the consumer made a big difference for us. And here we are today.
Excellent. Thank you, Azam. HP, it's great to see you again. I'm very keen to hear the updates from you on Momentum Commerce.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Thanks for having me. I think my e-commerce journey in Southeast Asia started 10 years ago. I was one of the co-founders of Lazada. I was running the Malaysia business for a couple of years, and then towards the end of my time, I was responsible for the cross-border business. In between, we got acquired by Alibaba in 2016, and so started to work very closely also with our Chinese colleagues in bringing Chinese brands and SMEs into the region. When I left, I started Momentum Commerce, a brand enabler. Basically, we provide e-commerce services and solutions across the entire value chain. Basically, brands outsource the e-commerce business to us. That is a model that how Alibaba operates in China with their partner ecosystem, and they brought that over to Southeast Asia and to us at Lazada, and then I started one of those brand enablers myself. I think COVID really helped us in the timing could have not been better to start Momentum, especially during COVID, when brands realized that they rely so much on online without all the offline channels being closed. The need for convincing brands to embark on the e-commerce journey, to scale it up, to expand across the region. The need to do that convincing was suddenly gone. Everyone understood suddenly that this is a channel to expand on, and even those who have already been on that e-commerce journey in our part of the world, where in the beginning it was more like a retail model, and brands were just working with distributors and they were selling B2B wholesale container shipments, and then just waited for that quarterly PO, moved into more a marketplace model. Brands started to be more interested in data, started to be more interested in customer journey, started to be more interested in what type of customers do they get from what type of channel, and so developing strategies based on that. And so that currency of data and understanding of customers really was fueled during the COVID period, and I think most recently what we've seen, even how that probably also swapped over from China into Southeast Asia, is the whole world of social commerce, live stream, TikTok launched TikTok Shop in Southeast Asia, etc. So the whole engagement with the creator economy, with influencers and KOLs is something that then swapped over into this part of the world. And yeah, thanks for having me today.
Excellent. Thanks, HP. Thanks, everyone. You've all put into your answers some points I'd love to tease out over the time we've got together. I think I'll start with a bit of a North Asia focus. So, Pierre, take your word in terms of some comments about China. So I would like to ask you a question about accessibility and Alibaba. So we know that Alibaba is making its platform more accessible than ever through models like import overseas fulfillment and the mini store. So for businesses that are looking at Alibaba, looking at China in particular, and particularly SMEs, so small, medium enterprises and brands, how do they access the platform? How do they know what's right for them in China's digital ecosystem?
Thanks, Lee. It's a very important question. It's certainly become a lot more competitive in China. Australia and New Zealand brands were fortunate that we were among the first to go into China, and we won't get too much today because there's a lot of specifics about accessing China to do with the different models you can enter. But most brands who are in shelf-stable products, beauty, skincare, supplements, health products, even milk powder, a lot of those will enter the market through what's called cross-border e-commerce. When I started at Alibaba about six years ago, there were maybe 3,000 brands on our Tmall Global, and that is now nearly at 40,000. So while the market has grown at a really fast pace and cross-border e-commerce still has a way to go, it is certainly becoming more competitive. So we also continue to evolve in the ways that we support brands to access that market. The great news is that in the last probably year and a half, we have, as you pointed out, developed two very, very approachable models. One is overseas fulfillment, and that is probably the most accessible one, where the product is picked and packed, fully customs cleared, fully compliant with all China's cross-border e-commerce regulations from warehouses in Sydney, Melbourne, and Auckland. And it's really it's held in Australia, in this case, or in New Zealand, if it's any New Zealand brands, companies online. And those products are then very easily fulfilled. And if they don't sell, they can just be very, very easily reintroduced back into your supply chain. The easiest way to do that is you actually store the products at one of our partner warehouses. There is another model where you can fulfill them from your own warehouse, but that's a little bit more complex. You need to have an API integration and so on. But for most brands, you could just put a small amount of your products and you can actually move them around, see which ones sell. What you would then do is you can then go, or you can start with this next model, which is called a mini store. And that is effectively your own flagship store, which is the key way that people in China, brands in China sell online, which is through having a virtual store. Think about it like a giant Westfield mall, and all the brands have their stores, and there's lots of different kind of stores. There's also stores selling lots of different brands. And you can have your own mini store, and that is effectively sold in one of our own. We will operate, let's say, some department stores. Maybe think about it like a David Jones in that Westfield, but that is an Alibaba store. And then we operate that store, and we can actually help you sell those products, and you can have almost like a concession. So you have quite a lot of visibility, but it's a very low risk model. You just move a little bit of the stock to the bonded warehouse in China. With those two models, you can be up and running in overseas fulfillment within a few weeks. And with mini store, you can be up and running within a couple of months. And the costs are actually very low, and they're mostly sold on a consignment commission basis. So with mini store, for example, you don't actually pay anything up front. You just pay a percentage after it's sold. So we're really making this very approachable. So what I would say is that to brands thinking about accessing China, this is probably a very good time to do it. Think about it, you can think about it in the first half of next year, very low risk. We're really keen to talk to all kinds of brands. We have solutions to all kinds of sizes. If you already have some established brand presence, you can still go for your own flagship store. So i.e. opening your own store in that Westfield, and that's definitely appropriate for some brands. But if you want to kind of test the market, incubate, you can really take some of these lower entry models. So we're really keen to work with all kinds of brands, all kinds of sizes. And sometimes it's not really about the size of the brand, it's really about their stage of development in China. So even some very big brands might decide to open a mini store first rather than a flagship store, just because they want to test which products are resonating with Chinese consumers.
Excellent. Thanks so much for that. Carolyn, I'm interested in your experience when setting up in China. I'm sure there are a few challenges, perhaps. How did you go as a business with challenges, opportunities, and perhaps even overcoming challenges?
Yes, thank you. So, I mean, I've got about 7 years experience in China. I kind of clipped the back end of the golden period where just being Australian and being a good selling brand in Australian retail was good enough for someone to take you on, low risk, buy your product up front and even spend their own money in marketing. I mean, those days, unfortunately, have gone. So second time round, this new company that I'm now representing, you know, we really had to look around. I had to talk to all my old contacts, some of them that were still there and had moved on. And I was so surprised that in effectively 2 years, how dramatic the market had changed in China. Nevertheless, I went in armed with my current knowledge or up-to-date knowledge, and you know, it's very much for me is a test and learn, adapt. It's just a constantly changing market. There are a lot of new trends that will come out. Like people will say, "Oh, Douyin is the new thing." You know, you've got to be on the Douyin store, and we were. You know, we met with people who said, oh, we've got the only Douyin store that can sell cross-border e-commerce, and this is the new wave, and, you know, you've got to get behind this. So we did try all of that, including guaranteed live streaming contracts. And you send all your product over there and it turns out that it's not guaranteed and you've got to, you're stuck with it. So for us, you know what, we did the tried and true approach of setting up a Tmall store, a flagship store. We felt that that was really important to establish the brand as authentic. And there's a cost to doing that, obviously. But for us, I mean, look, the first two things that you must do, and this time round, we had some issues doing it, nevertheless. One, you must have your trademark sorted in China. I know, look, most people should know that, but you've got to make sure that you've got your trademark in the right classes in China. Otherwise, you can't do anything. You know, Tmall will want to see everything when you set up a stall, and they need to make sure that you're compliant. So we had to work on that. Secondly, and you've got to have your trademark in China. Well, actually, with a cross-border e-commerce store, you only have to have your trademark in Australia, but we felt it important to have that trademark in China. The other thing that I didn't really think about at the time, but I think is really important, is you do need to have a Chinese name, ideally trademarked in China, in Chinese kanji, that Chinese people can then associate your, because they can't search in English, they can only search in Chinese. So we had to work through that. We see it very much as, you know, I kind of liken it a little bit like an Amazon in the US. It's very data driven. And rather than the old approach of taking your product in the Australian market and then adding 10 to 15% onto it, and that's your price point in China, what we did is we analysed the market to see, okay, well, where's the, by keyword, where's the gap, where's the opportunity, where can we play, and what is the price point? And then we would work backwards from there, and we would develop our own pricing strategy. Ultimately, I was selling our products cheaper in China than what we were selling them in Australia. And we were doing that to build the brand. We were doing that to really establish the brand in the Chinese market. You can't go in and go, this is my product and this is the price point, and, you know, and I've got to stick to that. You've got to look at China and understand the rules in China. Sometimes a 20 RMB price point can make the difference between selling 100 units and 10,000 units. So you really need to understand the dynamics of pricing. I did learn that one fairly early on. Having said that, that's one point. Then you've got to make sure that you're investing in building the brand and you can attract the traffic. So this is where buying the search terms comes in, no different to Google, no different to Amazon. Obviously, the bigger search terms are very competitive, they're expensive, so then you've got to be prepared to put the money in, and then you've got to make sure that you've got the right price volume. That was the other thing. We had the right product, but it was in the wrong value volume configuration. The other thing we found is, you know, starting up as a SME, it's about finding, again, the right keyword, the right link that you can build, and then you've got to make sure that you've got enough product that you can get into that channel. And what often happens when you do come across a bit of success is that you go out of stock. And then, of course, manufacturing in Australia or the US, wherever it is, there's always that delay and that lag time. So that will often mean we'd go back, we'd have to start again and reinvest to build up that link. So lots of stock starting. And then the new one that has emerged is the reviews. So China is just uber responsive to reviews. Everyone does them. You need to have 10 good reviews to 1 negative review. And if you don't have that balance right, well, then you've got to manage that. So that's a big part of what we do. So yeah, and I think, today and I would say this with any market, you have to invest in building the brand. And that's the challenge in China. So what we've decided to do is we invest everything we make into building the brand. It's got to be very targeted. So, we find what works and then we adjust from there. So we're now investing in live streaming. We're investing in the Tmall. We're investing our marketing dollars in the Tmall ecosystem. We find that we get the best return doing that. We have to invest in Red as well, which is the reviews. We do KOLs, but we're not finding that as responsive as we would normally find in the past. And again, it's different for every sort of product. So it's a stop, start, adjust until you can get a SKU, a hero SKU that has a solid level of demand. The product works, it's got demand, and then you can start pumping more money into it to kind of build that volume. And then once you've got one SKU firing, you can start to introduce other products. So that's the strategy that we're taking. We've, had a reasonable level of success considering the challenges, but the challenges are constant. So you've got to constantly kind of, as I said, pivot, try something else and adjust that. So that's pretty much been our approach.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that journey and insights. Azam, I'd love to come to you. If there's a market we hear, second most about or have the second most interest in after China, it would be Indonesia. And it feels like the e-commerce ecosystem there is really taking off with some similarities, but also quite a few differences. So can you share your business's e-commerce experience in Indonesia? What were your key challenges when you started trying to sell in that market, and where has it gone today?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Now, look, Indonesia is an interesting one. HP, I'm sure you've played with that market, so you know that quite well. We got into that market back in 2017, and we built some initial relationships with some of the distributors here, and we visited the market. And what I found one of the most interesting things in this market, and it's across a lot of Asian markets, is building relationships with with the distributors, breaking that ice and sort of really connecting with them. So we actually visited the market a couple of times. And understanding the market, I found to be one of the biggest challenges. At the time when we entered the Indonesian market, it was one of our first Asian markets to get into. But not only was different Australia, it's significantly larger in terms of population, and a stark contrast in terms of consumer preferences, e-commerce capabilities. So, but one of the advantages that we had was our primary ingredient, which is the black seed, was quite well known in this part of the world. So, we didn't necessarily have to educate the consumers on the existence of the product, but rather the existence of the brand and how we are different to some of the other brands out there. So we had to spend a fair bit of time to understand concepts, like consumer behavior and what their preferences were. And we learned some very interesting things along the way. One of the other challenges that we found was the registration process, which is, it's called the BPOM registration process in Indonesia. Now, that process took us a while. There was a lot of learnings that we went through at the initial stages. There were a lot of documents from us in Australia that sometimes don't exist. And then we have to go back to the authorities in Australia and says, look, this is a document that has been requested. and then they think about it for a little while, and then a document's been created, and then we have to go through the whole process. But it was nevertheless quite an interesting process. That process took us about a year and a half to go through the whole process, and we managed to come out on the other side successfully. But Indonesia, again, as I mentioned, is a very interesting market in terms of potential. The smartphone and the internet penetration are amongst the key drivers for e-commerce growth in that market. The internet, I'll give you some statistics. The internet penetration has increased from about 64% in 2020 to 73% in 2022. So it's unbelievable. YouTube is one of the biggest social media channels that's being used over there. WhatsApp has about an 80% usage rate in Indonesia. So there's a lot of opportunity, and it's expected to be one of the largest e-commerce growing markets behind Italy and in front of Canada. So there's a lot of potential going into that market. And there's quite a few different ways that people can sort of enter that market. You've got channels like, Tokopedia, you've got Bukalapak, you've got Lazada, you've got Shopee. So it just comes down to what the brands prefer to actually get into, or what channel works well for them. We set up with Tokopedia and Shopee, and then also subsequently Lazada as well. And we found that to be quite an interesting method to get in. And each sort of channel has its own intricacies that you have to learn about, and it works individually for certain brands and not so much for the other brands. In terms of other strategies, we've used KOLs in that market. And then one other interesting challenge that we faced in that market was when we went through the registration process. It was done under the name of our distributor. So, a couple of years after we had done business with the distributor, unfortunately, they had some issues locally, within their business. And then they said, look, because of these issues, we're unable to distribute your product. And then what happened there was that we were left with our registration. We were unable to use our registration because it was linked to our distributor. So now we actually to go through the process of saying, all right, we'll take a step back, register our own entity, which we've done, which is based in Surabaya, and then go through the BPOM registration again. Because we've been through registration once, it should be quicker and a little bit more smoother. But nevertheless, it's always important, and this is a bit of advice, is to make sure that the distributor that you're signing up with is able to have a long-term plan and is able to work with you. And also, if you're able to set up your own entity there, that's another path into that market. And then once you've done the registrations under your own entity, and then you have your BPOM registrations under your own entity, then you're free to sign up with distributors, with any sort of distributor in different parts of Indonesia. And also because it's such a large market and such a large populated area, using distributors in different states makes a lot of sense as well. So if it's in the Central Java district, or focusing on just on in Jakarta or in that region, you might work with different distributors. And then if you're working from an e-commerce perspective, you can work with either do it yourself or go with some of the local companies. There's quite a few different companies that can assist with setting up your e-commerce strategies there, and then working with the whole range of potential KOLs, working with setting up your social media and making sure that you're doing everything in Bahasa, in the local language, because people there prefer, and they always prefer to have it in the local language. So ensuring that all your material is in Bahasa makes a big difference.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Azam. You touched on some really good points. I think selection choices around distributors affects offline and online businesses alike, and planning ahead 1 or 2 years down the track for either success, if things are working out, where do you go next, or perhaps if they're not, also some considerations for options before you enter into agreements. Really good points. HP, I think you're in a really good position to provide some perspectives on, I guess, a compare and contrast Southeast Asia v China. I know within Southeast Asia, each market has its own unique differences, and you wouldn't want to generalize across all of them. But based on where the discussion's gone today, what are some of the similarities and differences you see in Southeast Asia vis-a-vis China?
So I wanna echo the comment on competitiveness. I think it's a very, very competitive market. You have 2-3 regional platforms, marketplace platforms that dominate and that basically create kind of a vertical marketplace experience on a horizontal platform, whereas in Europe or in the US, you have a lot of vertical platforms, niche marketplaces by category. You have much less of that here in Southeast Asia. And then you have some local marketplaces, 1, 2, or 2 or 3 by country, to end up at 5, maybe platforms that are really relevant and that dominate the e-commerce landscape. That is something very similar to China, and so the market share of those 4 or 5 platforms are probably in the 95 plus range when it comes to total e-commerce market. So that is something that is a bit more similar to China than maybe in the US, Australia, or Europe. On top of that, I think when we talk about Southeast Asia, we still talk about different markets, different countries, different languages and cultures and demographics. So operating in more than one can be already quite painful and can be like running 2 different organizations at the same time, just with a small overhead and synergies that you can realize in your organization. And not only do you have, let's say, the 6 major markets, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, but even within these markets, you have fundamental differences. Just looking at Indonesia with the 10,000 islands, metropolitan versus rural is a very, very different beast when it comes to logistics. The way logistics is structured when you can deliver with a bike, or you have to take a plane or even a boat after the plane, is something that has massive impact on your unit economics, and the way also you engage with those local demographics in some of the more rural areas. Then even the first leg of getting the product into the region is a very difficult one, and where you have in Malaysia and Singapore maybe a importation and regulation certification process of maybe 6 to 8 weeks. Right now, we're bringing a brand online in 2 more countries, and in Indonesia, we have been waiting for 6 months for this product to be registered. In Vietnam, now after 4 months, we had to start redoing everything from the start again because of a small formal or a lack of a document that was not submitted, and now has to be submitted again. So just getting products into the markets can be very tough. And then just because you have the products in the market, then the local adaptation of the language, of the content, of the type of influencers you work with can be also very confusing when you have, for example, a different festivity seasons. Indonesia and Malaysia, Ramadan is very big Muslim population, and then in the Philippines you have more the Christmas and the Easter season, and then you also have, when it comes to products in the F&B, FMCG side, halal products, Muslim fashion is very relevant in some countries, not so relevant in others. When you have some lingerie which might sell well in more liberal countries, you have a problem in Malaysia and Singapore. So these are things where you need to be very, very much aware of the local dynamics, and one mistake there can close some doors right in the beginning, and you need to really watch out here. And then when it comes to different, I think what Piers mentioned as well, different business models, different logistics model, then define what platform is the best for you. If you have already local stock in the market through a distributor, you have the product registered, you can be part within Lazada and within Shopee in the mall environment, very similar to the Tmall environment, flagship stores, authentic products, no C2C activities, no used products, etc. And there are very, very strict requirements to be listed in this platform. Whereas if you still want to have a cross-border model out of your home country, you would be disqualified to be listed in the mall environments. There is a way to start engaging with those platforms, start engaging with the region, and then moving the supply closer to the consumer. And if you do that, then some doors will open up in how you can, participate in more campaigns, get more data, and be even a partner of choice for super branded campaigns, etc., which you would otherwise not be invited for if you don't have local products in the market and still ship cross-border. So these are some of the things to consider, and wherever you are in the kind of in the journey of engaging with Southeast Asia, with markets in Southeast Asia, will then define what is the right environment, where to start, and where to migrate to later on.
Okay, thanks for that, HP. I might stay with you. I'd love to touch on marketing spend. I don't think there is a more expensive lesson to be learned. It's probably one of the most expensive lessons to be learned when it comes to where you put your dollars to draw interest and attention to your online presence. So we know that digital and social marketing is very important for e-commerce. Many Australian SMEs have absolutely fantastic products, but they might have a limited budget to distinguish their brand and build product awareness. What advice could you give to them on digital and social marketing?
If you want to succeed in Southeast Asia, back to the competitiveness topic, then you need to be recognized as a brand that is worth buying. And very often I've experienced that with Australian brands, but also European brands, just because of the success in the domestic market, and just because of the top of the funnel awareness and branding in the domestic market, you cannot rely on those merits. They usually don't mean much when you enter into a new market, and there has to be a go-to-market strategy that requires marketing dollars. The sheer, here I am, hello world approach rarely works. Obviously, if there is already awareness in the market, or if there is a tendency, for example, Malaysians very often study in Australia, so are very well aware with some Australian brands, and then that works well. But then and then for some Australian categories, obviously F&B and milk products, Australian brands are well known globally for their quality and reliability, etc. So that you might be able to rely on. But otherwise, it becomes a very competitive market. Suddenly, you play in a field where you deal with the different demographics. Affordability is a topic in Southeast Asia. Some markets less so, like Singapore, maybe Malaysia and Thailand. But then if you go into Indonesia and Vietnam, a $20 product, a $50 product becomes a problem if you're new to the market and you're dealing with a lot of local products, a lot of China supply. Malaysia alone, during my time at Lazada, 40% of the volumes came cross-border from China. And out of the other 60%, half of it was kind of OEM and private label products and supply coming in from China as well. So that's what you're dealing with. And those supply routes and manufacturing routes are just much cheaper. And that's the competition then. So in a nutshell, marketing investments are important. Building a brand are important. There are ways to do this in the online world much cheaper than in the past. There are now ways how to build kind of branding through live streams, through influencers, through social commerce channels. There is TikTok coming up right now everywhere in Southeast Asia, which is really getting competitive again, and no commissions, etc., and allowing brands to capture the entire conversion funnel just in one short video. And so that's something that also Lazada and Shopee are now moving into with the whole shoppertainment world. It's important for brands that enter the market to have marketing dollars to invest, be able to participate in promotions, drive traffic to the flagship store, and then engage with the audience and make sure that people start being aware of that market entry.
Thanks for that. Pier, same question to you. What is your advice on marketing and stretching budgets? Where should businesses be placing their marketing spend for maximum impact.
Thanks, Lee. And if it's okay, before I start, just to reiterate a theme that's clearly coming from the panel is it's really important to be flexible and to be able to respond quickly. And I think also second part of that is don't make a huge bet at the beginning. Don't put kind of all your stakes on the table if you're putting a casino analogy. So start with incubation, and I think that applies whether it's China or Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia, clearly you want to have a real understanding of which market and understand the different regulatory rules that apply. It is in fact, in our case, six different markets for Lazada. China, while it is one regulatory market, you still have all the other challenges, and Carolyn talked about the pricing and the packaging and all this other stuff, and you may find something that is a Chinese consumer sees it completely differently. Give you one example. There's a really good New Zealand brand that's in the avocado oil space. In the West, they are typically, or in New Zealand, in their home market, they're typically seen as a salad, so premium avocado oil for salad and I guess for cooking. In China, they are now doing great success in the mother and baby category because mothers trust it to mix into baby food. So a completely different category from where they would operate in their home market. And they found success. So again, they probably didn't know that when they started, right? So some people they started selling, some people discovered it, some others started mixing it into the baby food and probably shared that information online as well. So that's, I think, how you need to be really responsive. To your question about marketing spend, in China, it is in the beginning, it can be up to, let's say, 30% of your projected revenue. Now, again, that's hard to say upfront because you don't know what your projected revenue is. Some of our models, therefore, are pretty good because they take that 30%, after you've sold it. So again, this gets back to trying it, start doing something. What I would suggest to every brand is, obviously, you need to get the basics. Carolyn pointed out a really good one about getting your IP sorted and so on, and that will apply in really any market you want to export to. And I don't think that's unique to e-commerce. If you want to go to America, you've got to make sure your IP is protected as well. But once you've done this kind of basic building blocks, then I would suggest try it. Start small. If you get negative reviews initially, take that as positive. Take that as a positive because you can learn from that and build on that. The fact that your consumers are taking the time to give you their feedback, which Chinese consumers will, good or bad, I think is a good thing. You'd rather know that there's something not right with the product, and then you can fine tune it. Generally speaking, Australian, New Zealand brands are generally very high quality. They all have, good brand stories almost without exception. And it's just other things such as finding the right target market, finding the right packaging, finding the right messaging. So think about 30%, build that into your modeling, and then, build in flexibility and ability to change quickly.
Excellent, thank you. I'm keen to move to questions from our audience, and I'm pleased to say we have several questions already, but if you are online and you're looking to ask a question to one of our panelists, please use the Q&A function in Zoom to register your question, and hopefully we'll have time to get to them. I'll start with the first question that's come from the online audience, and Carolyn, I might direct this one to you. The question is, have any of the panel experienced copycat business or counterfeit businesses in China for legitimate foreign brands? And how do they respond to this? If you don't have an established presence in China to deal with this, what ways can this be managed or mitigated?
Okay, yes. I'm not on mute. Well, I have had that experience personally, actually. When in a previous role, I was launching Akin, which was a natural hair care brand, into China. Not even a well-established brand. I mean, established enough, I guess. Certainly very low awareness in China. However, there was a company that had set up their own website and was selling our products, which we thought was extraordinary. We ended up taking legal guidance on that, and we managed to close them down just through the legal network. We've had other examples where one of our sister companies had, and this is not what to do. What they had done was They were selling their product to a distributor who was playing on WeChat. So not visible, not on a marketplace that's visible. They're selling directly to consumers on WeChat. They had great success selling small amounts of their products to this particular manufacturer. They had owned the registration of their brand, but what this manufacturer or what this reseller did is that they then registered the Chinese version of that brand name. And as you know, in China, first to register gets the registration. They then promised big volumes to manufacture in China. They gave them the formulation, and then their business was gone. All of a sudden, they had the Chinese brand name, and they'd managed to get the formulation, and it didn't really matter if they had the formulation; they would have made it up anyway. The only way to tackle that was to fight them on the ownership of the registration and prove that they, acted incorrectly as a trade partner. And again, it's a long legal battle that you've got to make. In the end, I think they decided not to do that and abandoned the channel. We have had some success where we were able to do that. And I think that does come back to really making sure that, I can't stress it enough, getting that trademark resolved in the right classes. We had another case where we were working with a distributor who we thought we had the right trademark. We owned it in class 5, and as hair loss products fall into class 3 or class 5, but you needed the brand in class 3, and we didn't have the brand in class 3, and they couldn't trade. Now we ended up, what we do with trademarks is we've got a very good trademark lawyer in China who is actually from Holland, believe it or not. But what they do is they have a team of people, and we identify the objections, and we just pick them off one by one, and we just slowly just get it. It might take a couple of years, but you can generally get that trademark if the lawyers seem to think that there's an opportunity there. And in our cases, pretty much they were able to deliver on most things that they recommended. So we were able to mitigate that risk that way. I do know of examples. For example, I think this is an old one, but the Wheat Bix example, where Wheat Bix managed to get onto a TV show in China. Wheat Bix went nuts. They didn't own the trademark. So they had to change the name to Wheat Brix in the China market. So look, it's a constant problem. And I think, the first thing to do is you just got to check your trademarks before you get into that market. Anyway.
Can I add to that as well, Lee? Everything Carolyn said is absolutely correct. A couple of other parts to add to that. One is there is a real benefit. First of all, counterfeiting and IP infringement, parallel importing, all these kind of issues are certainly not restricted to China. They're very much a global problem. And don't forget, China is a massive consumer market. So just because it's so big, there will be things happening, but that doesn't mean they're not going to happen. And I'm sure our colleagues here on the call, our counterparts here on the call in Southeast Asia, that'll be there as well. And it also happens in the West. So you need to get the basics right. One benefit of being on an e-commerce platform doesn't have to be Alibaba's ones, but one of the I think top tier ones. And Carolyn referred to this initially as well with setting up a flagship store. It does create a brand reference point where consumers know that they're getting trusted products. So one way to counter this, if there are products, and sometimes they're sort of products that are inspired by the brand, right? So they're not actually infringing on the copyright, but they kind of look similar, and you'll see that in the West as well. And there are lots of very successful Western brands that have imitated other brands as well. By selling it through an official channel like your own store gives consumers that trust. So that's a really important answer to that, is just create a trusted channel. Yes, but at a certain point you can get bogged down in all this kind of worrying about counterfeits, where actually what you're better off doing sometimes is just focus on building legitimate sales through a trusted channel. And the final point I'd add is it's really important that yourselves or your partners, and this can be done through if you work with trade bodies such as your state export bodies, Global Victoria, Invest and Trade New South Wales, they can help you also. That's really important to let the platforms know that this is happening. If you see something that is clearly in contravention, if we don't know it's there, we have a lot of proactive monitoring, but we have systems where you can register these IP or alleged IP violations, and then we will respond to those. And it's sort of AI, right? So we learn, once we know what's happening, we can find it more easily. So it's really important as well that you don't do this in silence and that you let people know, such as the marketplaces, that we can help.
Great. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Pierre. Pierre, I'll stay with you. I've had a comment online, and it feeds into a question. So the comment was that there are brands that literally employ people to monitor online stores and other websites for copycats, and they look to jump on it and escalate quickly. I had a question as well, which was, given that the marketplace, particularly the China marketplace, changes almost instantly daily, how do you cope with this rapid change, particularly with product supply, these types of considerations? So I want to pick up on something you said in terms of where you devote time. Is it jumping on potential copycats, or is it building your store? A question about monitoring and where you should focus your efforts.
My view on this, and you just need to look at the Australian brands, who some of which are very, very large brands now that started very small and have found huge success. In general, and I think this is a general advice in business, focus on the positive aspects that are going to help you grow your business. Yes, absolutely, get the building blocks right. Seek advice before you start, register your IP, do all those things. But then what you should be focusing on as a brand owner, particularly if you're an SME brand and you don't have in-house legal teams and so on, is focus on building your brand, focus on growing your sales, make more noise. If there is this kind of counterfeit or people taking inspiration from your brand, make more noise than them, in effect. Be the trusted channel, show that you are the real product, and consumers will go for that. They always want to buy, the consumers want to buy the real trusted product. Australian brands are fortunately not in the position where maybe some global luxury brands who sell items that are thousands of dollars, where people will knowingly buy a counterfeit because it's $20 instead of $2,000. With most Australian, New Zealand products, health products, food products, skincare products, consumers really want to know that what they're taking in their body or putting on their body is the right product. So they will go for the legitimate products. Work with one of these agencies, absolutely. You can get advice through that, as I said, through Austrade, through your state exporting bodies. They can help you find those partners who will do that for you, but don't get tied up on it. Like I said, IP violations, IP protection is a global issue, and it shouldn't stop you being afraid to go and grow your business overseas. If it's not China, it could be Southeast Asia, or it could be the US. You still need to do those things.
Thank you. HB, I'd love to ask a question that's a little bit forward-looking, and it is a question that's come through the discussion as well from the online audience. And this is talking about the rise of services on e-commerce. Obviously e-commerce lends itself to the selling of products, and we're all familiar with that and appreciate it. But across the platforms in Southeast Asia, do you have anything to say about services being featured on e-commerce platforms? Is that happening? Is it happening in the main platforms, or is it on the rise of specialist e-commerce platforms?
I think Lazada has, or at least had, a section which was called Service Marketplace, and I think when I spoke about that horizontal platform with a lot of vertical experiences, what I mean with that, it's that super app environment in which you then have separate entry points for the Lazmart for groceries, and then you have kind of a different entrance for games and all different kinds of things that make the super app more sticky. And very often some of those super apps have then are aggregator of services, right? I think both Lazada and Shopee have some of those verticals integrated, but then you would have the Grab super app, you would have in Indonesia Gojek, that provide more services around e-commerce related topics, right? It could be appointments in beauty salons, it could be all different kinds of delivery and ride hailing services. So every now and then, the big e-commerce platforms try to kind of extend their scope into the service area, and the super apps then that are focused on services start to include product relevant, kind of acquisition relevant content. But there's no clear sign that really works well for either of those.
Great, thanks for that. We're
sorry, Lee, I know we're running out of time, but can I just jump on that services question? Sorry to dominate so much of this discussion. Services are obviously a huge, I mean, it's a great question, and services span all kinds of services, right? But I think a lot of the same holds true, the things we're talking about now that don't, look, Asia, there is huge opportunity in Asia for services businesses. If your service is sort of advisory, consulting, marketing, you may be able to support brands that are finding success through e-commerce, right? So you may still be part of that e-commerce journey, but you may play a different role. We're finding, I know that Austrade has found some real success with software as a service SaaS companies that have gone to China, probably against the trend where a lot of tech companies think, oh no, we don't want to go to China, we don't want to go to Asia, we'll go to the West. But the ones that actually take the sort of counterintuitive, as in consumer goods, people often think of China first, and tech, China isn't necessarily first, but the ones that actually go there can find real success. But again, you've got to do your homework. So to me, there's huge opportunities for services. I mean, for us, our marketplaces, as pointed out by HP as well with Lazada, I mean, they're primarily consumer goods products platforms, but a lot of services companies can support that activity.
Thank you. As we come towards the end of our time, I'm just looking at the clock. I would like to give all panel members an opportunity to provide some final comments on any of the discussion today, perhaps even some tips or sagely advice to our online audience. Azam, can I start with you? Any final advice or comments for our audience?
Look, I think there's a fair bit that has been covered by all the members here. But from my end, look, I think doing your research, making sure that you're getting into the market that that you can spend money on, because there are certain markets that are that require larger marketing spends than others. So making sure that you've got all all your I's, all your T's crossed, your I's dotted. And making sure that you're able to tap into that market, making sure your pricing strategy is correct. Focusing a little bit on Indonesia, very price conscious market. So as your product may be the best, but if your pricing is not right, you're not going to be able to have success in that market. And just making sure that you're having that go-to-market strategy perfectly outlined. Because otherwise you can get in and then come out on the other side unsuccessful.
Thank you so much. Carolyn, final advice.
I would agree with everything Azam said there. For me, look, I think that you do have to look at this from a data perspective and really try and identify where the gap or the opportunity is and what product you think is going to be relevant. The other thing that we do is we actually test our products with consumers in China before we even go into market. And, we might get 100 consumers to try the product to get feedback. Consistency, the fragrance, the effect, try and really understand. I would also suggest talking to as many people as possible. I've been in this game now for 7 years, but I learn every day. There's always, because it is moving constantly, there's always new learnings and insights to leverage. I also find that, it really is a market where you've got to test and learn, do something, adapt. You've got to be prepared to be in it for the long term. Don't think that you can launch into China, at least, and I'm probably the same for the other markets. Don't think that you can launch and get a quick win. Sometimes you can, but inevitably it's a long game. And I think it's about trying to find, learning, understanding, trying to find the market, the right product, the right market at the right price point. And it is very much that. And once you've got that, it's like any market, like any digital e-commerce market. Once you've got like in Australia, if you've got a positive ROAS, you can put more money behind it to drive growth. Same in China. If you've got a product that's working and it's giving you that positive growth, then you can start to supercharge and spend that money to amplify because the market's there. So test and learn, talk to as many people as possible, start small. All the good ideas that have been put forward, I think, make sense. And, it is really about also finding a unique little position that you can own.
Thank you. HP, over to you.
Yeah, so for me, Southeast Asia e-commerce, it's still the second hour of the day. That is still such an incredible environment. If you're not yet in Southeast Asia, you haven't lost yet. If you're still small in Southeast Asia, you haven't lost yet. The market dynamics are still, like the tectonic plates are still shifting, the goalpost is moving. However, on the flip side, if you're already successful, you haven't won yet. So this is a market that is still moving and a lot of things are happening. We experienced when we came into the market that there were a lot of local platforms that thought they won, the local incumbents. Then we thought we are the local incumbent. Then Shopee came. Then Shopee thought it's a local incumbent. Then TikTok came. And I expect those dynamics to still go on for a couple of years. And so the opportunities for brands are still there, but also the risk of, getting complacent and then thinking that the work is done. Whereas in 3 years, the market might look completely different. And so it's not too late if you want to jump on the train, but watch out if you're ahead to also stay ahead.
Great advice, HP, and great overview of the Southeast Asia market. Pier, final comment from yourself.
The theme I think today is there's huge opportunities out there. China, Southeast Asia, other markets as well, Western markets. Start e-commerce if you're almost any kind of product, branded product that reaches consumers. Consumer e-commerce platforms are a great way to start. This is not about saying it has to be with Alibaba. We focus on some solutions that we feel are really appropriate for brands of different sizes. But I think the key is to start your journey. Initially, maybe see it as a marketing. The first stock you put into a mini store or overseas fulfillment, just see that as a marketing investment. Don't put a lot in there, but also don't worry if it doesn't pan out, because you're going to learn a lot from it. And it's a great opportunity. Australian, New Zealand brands are very well regarded. And we also are very fortunate in Australia and New Zealand that we have fantastic support networks, chambers of commerce, Austrade, state export agencies, obviously Asia Link providing a lot of great information out there. In New Zealand, you have New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, Export New Zealand. Just go and talk to people, and people are there to help you on your export journey. And then there are obviously, besides that, there are then lots of great third parties that can help you, such as Momentum eCommerce that we've got here today. Partners that are going to help you on your journey. So I would just say start. Feel free to email me. I'm sure Asia Link. Feel free to share my contact details with the people on this who attended the webinar. And just start having a chat to us. And start your journey. That's I guess that's my key message.
Just start. A great way to end. Excellent. Look, thank you everyone for your comments and insights today. Thank you also to our audience members who provided their questions for the panel. To those in our audience, you will have received a link in the chat to our survey. We'll also be sending you a copy of that survey link via email. The feedback you provide to these surveys, it only takes a minute to complete, but the feedback is absolutely vital in helping us to improve future events. I would like to end by thanking our panelists, Pier, Carolyn, Azam, HP, and also Sachvinder for joining us today and sharing all of your remarks and really helpful information. It's incredibly valuable to hear about the opportunities, but also how to navigate some of those challenges that face businesses as they look to pursue e-commerce in Asia. Thank you once again, everyone who's joined. We look forward to seeing you at another AsiaLink business event in the near future. Thank you.